Hi, my name is Professor Jonathan Wilson, and I am based in London. I am a professor of brand strategy and culture. And prior to that, I started my career working in advertising in the late 90s in London, back when you could smoke in the office, you didn't have a computer on your desk, and it was kind of Mad Men.
You don't look that old, but thank you for joining me today.
I'm old enough. It's funny because I have to remind some people, like I'm older than Obama was when he became president. I'm older than David Cameron and Tony Blair when they became prime minister. But I guess life has been good to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to ask you, there's this whole idea of, here in North America, very, I guess recently we've been going back and forth and debating in the whole marketing and advertising space on how we continue or really start to include, different races and different types of people, rather than, what is predominantly shown on commercials and billboards. It's the same type of person. We all know that consumers are different. So my question to you is, why has it taken so long for marketers, brand marketers, to sort of realize that and not be scared to include different shades and different types of people in their campaigns?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I guess I think in two ways. And one way is that if you look historically at advertising and you're looking for evidence and artifacts of this occurring, then you will find them. It's like, especially now that we're all binge watching movies on Netflix. And I
Yeah.
was looking at that I think it was on Amazon Prime. Is it One Night in Miami, where you've got Muhammad Ali, you've got Malcolm X, you've got, it's interesting to see these icons at that time and
Mhm.
what they meant to society and the influence that they had and the sway. And I do that because it'd be easy to think, if you are of a certain generation or in a certain space, that things have never happened before. But the more that you look, you find out that things have happened before, but they've just gone off the radar. Or, you look at some business magazines, and if I was to kind of be slightly cheeky, you could say that the same story comes out about the same time every year. So if we look at
Mm.
round about April, May time for the Muslim community, it's going to be the month of fasting in Ramadan. And you're going to see all of those articles saying, hey, it's Ramadan and Muslims fast. And do you know that they can't drink water during daylight hours? And you're like, what? I saw that like every year for the past decade or so.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a surprise. It's like, we didn't know. And you think, how didn't you know? But then having said that, though, on the other side, yet there has been a seismic shift, last year with Black Lives Matter. And there was this
Mhm.
outpouring where suddenly I was in fashion, right? Suddenly afros are all
Hmm.
over the place. And people are like, hey, John, you're kind of fashionable. It's like, well, I kind of had an afro for most of my life, right? But I see billboards with these delicious afros, men, women, young kids, mixed race families, this
Yeah.
kind of exotic peculiarity when I think, look, that was my reality for decades. And it's kind of gone unnoticed. And then suddenly you see Hollywood celebrities who have spent some of their career passing, taking on roles where they've had to suppress their cultural heritage or ethnicity, now celebrating it.
Hmm.
Maybe they look a little bit darker on the film. Who knows? I wouldn't like to say what they're doing, but I think that, yeah, that there has been a kind of watershed moment where people have thought, okay, we are going to look more seriously at this. And the first wave of that is through advertising, right? Through above the line um,
Hmm.
commercials. It's debatable whether that's going to filter throughout the industry, where we're going to see a change in how people are recruited and where responsibilities lie and who is in power and stuff like that. But what we can see, though, is there are lots of photographs and adverts, and there are a few more keynote speakers, right, who look
Yeah.
beautiful on posters, and they're championing this notion that, the world is ready for change. And of course, there are a few brands like Uncle Ben's Rice, and I
Mm.
think about, all of those historical brands like Robinson's, marmalade, which had the gollywog, and there are more companies saying, okay, yeah, we understand that we've been culturally insensitive, and we're going to draw a line in the sand and make a change. And
Yeah.
in London, it's kind of funny. It reminds me of the artist Prince, because you've got Cass University London, Cass Business School, which now is going to drop the name Cass. So it's City University London Business School, formerly known as Cass. And that's because if you look at Sir John Cass and his history, he's kind of been heavily involved in the slave trade, right? But you
Hmm.
think to yourself, you didn't know this, right? You did know this, and you
Yeah.
did take that money. And I think now everyone is kind of scrambling to work out, okay, how do we do this? Do we pull down all the statues? Do we have all of these? It reminds me of, when we saw the war in Iraq, and there was this iconic moment where the statue got pulled down, and
Yeah.
we had the same thing in Bristol, in England, and people are afraid that we're going to pull down all the statues, because if you start to do the history, you realize this is complicated. And I'm not saying pull down all the statues, but what I am saying is we do need to be smart about this, and we do need a clear head, and just to avoid some of these slightly toxic discussions of, like, where cancel culture goes too far, or where the
Hmm.
far right, rear their ugly head, and just think, how are we actually going to solve this problem, you know, in a clever way? And some of the things that we need to focus on are just representation within industry, but not just to tick boxes, not just because suddenly we realize there's a brown man in the office and we're going to ask him about Diwali and Eid and all and Rosh Hashanah and any other kind of exotic religious celebration that we can think about, but actually hire experts, and also be careful about going the other way and making a mistake, and just looking at those attributes that are now being identified, especially when you scroll through social media. And by that, what I mean is that now that we've all got profile photographs, we're on LinkedIn, and people have names which kind of link them to a certain geography, it would be a mistake to assume that there are people who don't have those names or don't look that way, um, and that they don't understand actually how things are. Because, for example, if I took my father, he is a blue-eyed white man. So,
Hmm.
but on social media, he just looks like another Scottish guy, right? He's another Wilson. And I could imagine that if he was active on social media, it might be easy for people to jump down his throat and say, but you don't know about black people. and and you'd have to say,
Sure.
well, he kind of does know about black people, because he married a Caribbean lady in the 70s and knows what it's like to walk down the road with kids that don't look like you. So
Hmm.
I don't want people to be frightened off in thinking that, if you are in mixed relationships, you've got children, you've got grandchildren, you've been on holiday in different countries, there's a real risk that with this watershed moment that we lose something that was actually happening, which was globally, we are becoming more connected and more understanding. It's just that it's not directly reflected in some of the corporate practices, their marketing, their advertising, and the senior decision-making roles.
Yeah. I had a question, but I think you've answered it in terms of, why is it important for brands to recognize that the marketplace is more than just white and blue-eyed. But I think you sort of, you've answered that. Uh,
I'd say, yeah, of course, there's an ethical and a moral imperative, right?
yeah, yeah.
We are human beings, so we have to have ethics and morality somewhere in our existence, right? But also, you could talk about cancel culture and the fact that quite quickly companies are having to grow up and fix up and face up to
Hmm.
this reality. But also, if I want to be blunt, some of it is about money and selfishness. If you want to have a
Hmm.
business in the future, it's smart money to start considering these massive populations around the world, emerging economies, young demographics that are affluent, intellectual, and willing to spend.
Interesting. So is it, when here in North America, when it was, when it came out that Colin Kaepernick had been paid by Nike while he was out and he was donating this money and he was speaking about issues. I don't know if that name, sorry, rings a bell.
Yeah, it
uh,
does. Yeah.
to you. Okay,
He's an
good, good.
Afro.
Okay,
Afro recognizes Afro.
all right. Um, but it was interesting because then the conversation came about. Um, should brands pick a side? Should they
Yes.
pick? Yeah, okay. And
Yes. I think so. And in Nike's case, they've been very smart because yes, they lost some of their audience, and yes, we heard about people destroying sneakers and putting them outside their door. But in terms of credibility, street cred, um, a particular audience that felt grateful that they were being, supported, recognized, and celebrated, then they increased their spend. But also, if you want to look globally, what does the world look like?
hmm,
Outside of North America, that's a clear message to other parts of the world, Africa, Middle East, Asia, that perhaps have kind of been sensitive to the nature of kind of, foreign policy or, I remember, and it goes through waves, right? But, whether there's anti-Americanism and some brands escape that, like if you're Apple and you said that you're made in California, it's for a reason. You don't say you're the good old American brand because perhaps it wouldn't sell as well as made in California. And so I think Nike was smart about that. And also, they've had their own problems at HQ with regards gender issues and sexism. It would be a mistake to think that, that this organization is perfect, but there are lots of organizations that have these problems. And so that definitely kept that off the front page.
and so when brands are looking to get out into the marketplace, to want to be on the right side of history, to want to ensure that their values are progressive, are there certain things that they should avoid, or certain pitfalls or mistakes that they want to make sure that, obviously they don't want to make any mistakes, but are there certain things that you think they should be cognizant of as they start getting out into the marketplace with these ideas?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because I guess, the golden rule is don't come out of your lane, right? Don't come out of your comfort zone. But you might then say, aha, but we want you to come out of your comfort zone because we want to see change. But just be really careful. So, if you want to change your lane, think about the staff that you have on board to help you on that journey. And it can't be a knee jerk reaction, it's going to take time. And
Hmm.
sometimes, perversely, I'd say if you don't know what to say, then say nothing. It
Okay.
might it might be, but say nothing and watch and learn.
Hmm.
Don't say nothing forever, but if you're not quite sure what to say, then sometimes saying nothing is a good idea. So avoid tokenism. Avoid trying to see this as a tick box exercise and attempting to tick as many boxes at the same time, right? So don't think, great, we've got like a Muslim apostate, trans, Afro, African American, female, all in one package.
Yeah.
That's who we should lead an advert with. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I'm saying that that's not going to solve the problem of inclusion and diversity in a variety of communities, right?
Hmm.
So avoid tokenism, hire experts. Yeah. You can't afford to employ them full time. Pick their brains and hire them from time to time. Um, be also sensitive about your corporate culture because it might be the case that you haven't had an environment that's allowed these ideas to flourish. So even if your workforce is diverse, and I've worked in organizations like that in advertising where people might have been afraid to say, well, I don't know if that's cool because they thought that it might affect their employment, right? Or they might get shouted down. So some people have just kept their heads down from minority communities, or they've been asked their opinion and they said what they thought people wanted to hear, right? So be sensitive to the fact that you might not have the right culture. One campaign isn't going to make a change, so you've got to be in for the long game and just ignore that vocal minority that you're going to attract who are going to oppose the change and they're going to sling mud. Don't bail out halfway because once you've gone on that journey, the worst thing that you could do is then backtrack because whatever goodwill and respect that you built up, it's just going to evaporate. So I would say, you know, to sum all of those things up, just think if these people were your friends, how do you think they'd want you to act? So if you're going to have certain people in your adverts, you're going to have people in your organization, you're targeting particular communities, see them as your friends and just
Mm.
step behind, some of these metrics and models that you might use and the numbers and the figures, and just take a step back and think, okay, I want these people to be my friends. How do I do that? And that doesn't mean that you've got to be exactly like them, but you have to be credible, you have to be sincere, you have to be trustworthy, and that's kind of really important.
All the things that we learn as we're marketing.
Yeah, and you can't say that. You can't say, trust me, I'm
You
humble.
know?
Trust me, I'm sincere. I sincerely hope that you enjoy my humble contribution.
Yeah.
Or, I really like South Asian people. I had a curry the other day. Okay. Like, what sort of curry did you have? Did you use your hands? Did
Yeah.
you order it in Punjabi? Like, like, or did you cut your naan with your knife and fork? I'm not saying
Oh
that's
boy.
wrong, but
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, like, just be careful. Like, and that's where I think friendship is really important, because we've all had cringeworthy moments where we tried to make friends, and then somebody pulled us to one side afterwards and said, "Dude, that was so cringeworthy." Probably
Like,
because you haven't had enough experience or exposure to those communities. So if you don't have any South Asian or Desi friends, right, and you don't realize how cheesy and just horrible that sounds by saying, "Oh, I had a curry the other day," and you're surprised when perhaps just to front it out, somebody says, "I don't like curry. I don't like curry." And they go, "Really? I thought that you would like curry, but does your mum cook curry?" And you're like, and they're just saying that because they don't want you to see them as just being a curry eating Asian, right? They're
yeah.
American or they're British or they're French.
There's more to me than the food I eat. Uh,
Exactly. All of those things, curry, like, somebody fist bumping you because you're Caribbean and people going, "Yeah, man, cool." Like, oh, like, and some of that is maybe unconscious, or it's kind of like, it's like a form of Tourette's, right? It's like what's in your head, but sometimes what's in your head is not meant to
that's
be
right.
said. Right? Just remember
Uh,
that.
Professor John, you wrote a book a couple of years ago called Halal Branding.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
very quickly, why that book, and why was it important for you to write that?
Um, it was the book that people kept telling me to write and I kept putting off because I wanted to write a book on branding, full stop, right? But there are lots of books on branding. And along my travels, speaking at conferences, publishing research papers, I have been tackling branding in the context of the Muslim world, Muslim majority, minority countries, and just where I think there are gaps in kind of thinking and practice. And so people kind of said, "You know what, John, it's about time that you wrote that book and put it all in one book that you can put on somebody's shelf." And so then the next challenge was, how do I write such a book? And from my perspective, I wanted to, regardless of wherever you're from, get people to think differently. It's not a book for Muslims and it's not a book for non-Muslims. It's a book for anybody, basically. I know it sounds like ridiculous, but I did write that with those thoughts in mind, that if I'm going to write this book for non-Muslims, how would they understand Muslims and Islam and branding and all of those things put together? And at the same time, if it's for non-Muslims and you're a Muslim reader, how do I avoid you thinking, "Yeah, I know all of that"? So I kind of went on a journey, and really on the other side, it was also to write something that was kind of feel good, in the sense that often when we read about the Muslim community, we hear these words like the T word that I'm not going to mention, right? Um, but all of these things where it's doom and gloom, they cause problems, they're not happy, or are we religious anymore? And it was
Mm.
just to try and take a fresh look and to think, okay, from a business and a kind of socio-cultural perspective, how can I present this community in these arguments? And also, I think linked to that was, I was inspired by when I would read about other books where somebody would say, "Oh, this is the Japanese approach to management." And we learn these words like kaizen, and everyone thinks, "Oh, that's really good." Or Chinese ways of networking.
Huh.
And you hear about guanxi and all of these sorts of things, right? I wanted to think, okay, has the Muslim world done enough in the business community of demonstrating their contributions? And that isn't just, "Oh, Islamic finance and zero interest bank accounts. It's actually looking back historically and thinking, what are some of the things that helped the Islamic world to advance from Korea to Hungary? And some of those practices within business, and just to start to open up those discussions. And also, I think to celebrate people in the Muslim community that I think haven't had enough airtime. So, like, the book cover's shocking pink.
Mhm.
I'm unashamedly like celebrating the fact that we've got a young demographic. And when I was designing the book cover, because I designed it with my team, I was actually in a cafe in Kuala Lumpur, and I was with my designer, and we were like, we had a number of different covers, and I just leaned over to this other table, and there was a table of three ladies, and I said, look, can I just show you, this is going to be my book cover, which one do you like? And they're like, so you're writing a book on halal branding. What is halal branding? And I said, well, it's kind of like this. They're like, oh, can you brand halal? I was like, of course you can brand halal. And that was interesting because I'm getting this kind of feedback. And then the cover that they pointed to, they said, oh, I like this one. And yeah, it was a pink cover, and it's got my face on the cover, like a load of logos in my
Yeah.
afro, right? But I'm smiling. And I said, so why do you like this cover? Because actually, I didn't want to be on the front cover because I thought I'd much rather have something else or somebody else. But they said, we like that cover because you're smiling and you make religion look friendly and happy. And I was like, okay, cool. You sold it to me. So thanks to those three ladies in Kuala Lumpur in that coffee shop, that was cool.
Awesome.
So it was kind of, I think there was a feel good element, but also there's a serious aspect, which is, I think that someone has to champion the Muslim community, but also I want to signal to the business community, there's a massive opportunity there, which is yet to be actualized in the way that I think we could. And it's my calling card. So hit me up and hire me.
Professor Jonathan Wilson, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Power your advertising. Working with Active International enables you to fund your advertising using your company's own products, assets, or even services. We have over 30 years' experience connecting and bringing value to businesses all over the globe, helping many brands scale up into household names. Want to achieve more from your marketing spend? Contact Active International today.